Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I am Ross Marassa with my guest today, or I should say returning guest, George Turnage, a.k.a. Papa Yatande to many people around his world. He is one of the leaders at the Peristyle Haitian Sanctuary in Philadelphia. George, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ross.
Now, we've had numerous conversations, and I had some things I wanted to talk to you about today, which maybe we'll get to. However, you threw a zinger at me where you said that you are now working on a book. So
Yeah.
what's that going to be about? Is it a murder mystery?
Oh, I would love to write a murder mystery. But unfortunately, I had to start with what my godkids were pressing me to do about the information that I have. I mean, after really 45 years of being involved in spirituality and learning all the things that you learn, helping all the people and still helping people, they said, start writing some of this stuff down. And they said, I didn't know what to write. And they said, why don't we start from the beginning? So I put something on paper called How It Began. And I just started writing how I started.
So is that your working title right now for your book?
It's the working title right now. I'm sure it's going to change because after talking with such illustrious writers and producers, like yourself, like Ross, I figured, I'm just throwing something out there to see if it stick against the wall,
You'll find as you write that when you have something that doesn't work, it allows you and everyone else around you to start to get closer to what would work. But inside of that story of, where it all began, sort of concept, where did it all begin?
14. I was age 14.
Oh,
we had moved from Maryland by my mother getting a job with the government at it used to be called Food Fair, and she was an accountant for them. This was way back when you had stores like A&P and things like that here in Philadelphia. So we moved here, and unfortunately, she was hoaxed by some people who she thought had her best interest and put her money down on a home, which we came to Philadelphia to find that, to discover that all of that was untrue and that she had gotten arrested from squatting. I mean, my mother with 6 kids, right? And so we were scared to death because we had never seen a place like Philadelphia. And we were in Germantown with the brick cobble streets and the row housing and stuff like that. We had never seen places like that, not out of North Carolina or in Maryland where we lived at. So eventually they released her and she came back home. My sister, I got to give props to my older sister, Kay, who became mom, and kind of held us together. And then we ended up leaving to go to North Philadelphia. They gave her a public housing place on 1557 North 9th Street. And so we were glad to pack up what little stuff that we had. They gave her a person with a moving truck. And we had a little Volkswagen Rabbit, if you can remember. I don't even know if they make the Rabbit anymore. But and it was late December or early December. It just turned December because I was about to turn 14 years old on December the 9th. And it was in a snowstorm that was blinding, and it had crippled all of the city's utilities and things like that. But we were able to make it following the moving truck onto 9th Street. And when we turned on 9th Street, we saw our hearts just sank because on the right hand side was nothing but, because it's going north on 9th Street after the famous Philadelphia Bridge, the 9th Street Bridge. So we make a left, and on the right we see all of these houses, but on the left, there was buildings that had been burned out from 9th and Jefferson all the way to 9th and Oxford. And it just sank us, you know. And so when we got there, long story short, it began to be one of the best places or the best things that had ever happened to us, because not only did the local gang, Oxford Street Gang, came to visit us to let us know who they were, but we met the leaders of the gang, like Charlie Brown, 1 Inch, Bobby Leach, you know.
Were these was this a friendly introduction?
It was a very friendly introduction. They came to see our little Southern accents and meet my mother, who is always hospitable, and invited them in and had food cooking and set them down at the table, served them wine. And they were like, you know, my God, you know, they didn't expect any of that. And we were a musical family. So we began to play music and stuff. And Charlie Brown had announced to the entire community and even surrounding gangs that we were untouchable. You know, so it became something that was incredible, because they introduced us to the R.W. Brown Boys and Girls Club in the next 100 up at 9th and Columbia. That's where it used to be. And it moved over to 8th Street. And it changed our lives. But later on, I think I was 16 years old, and I was having a dream, you know, one of those dreams that you've had that it's absolutely real. And I had to go to the bathroom. So I'm leaving the corner of 9th and Oxford and telling my brother and friends, I got to go to the bathroom.
In your dream, this is
in
what's
the
happening.
dream.
Okay.
And I leave, I run to the bathroom, and to realize that I was dreaming, that I was not going to the bathroom. I was not even in the bathroom. So I jump up out of my bed to behold an apparition standing in the doorway, and his arms were stretched out. 3 gifts I give thee: sight, song, and healing hands. And I sat up, and but it was so beautiful. This, like the pointed hood and outfit all the way to the floor, with the shoes matching and a cane, and he had this hue of light around it, you know, and it had diamond and emerald and sapphires and rubies. I mean, big stones all over it. I never seen anything like that before in my life, not even in paintings or imagination. So I stand up slowly, and it began to back away because they came into the doorway. He couldn't come, excuse me, into my bedroom.
I want to make sure I'm interpreting this right, Papi Atande. So this is now the space you're in is actually just waking up, but for real now.
Yes.
And you're seeing this apparition in your doorway.
Yes.
Okay, please continue.
I go to stand up, and it backed away, and I slowly followed it out of my bedroom into the hallway as it turned to go down the hall. Long story short, I had a sensation of going to the bathroom. I run downstairs to the bathroom. I swear I don't even remember touching any steps. I know I had to have used the bathroom. I don't remember if I did, if I flushed. I know I didn't wash my hands. And I don't remember hitting one step, getting back upstairs to the floor looking for it. And it wasn't there. Long story short, my mom told me that I met the Holy Spirit, you know, because she was very religious. And she said, you're going to have to be a preacher. And I was like, but that's supposed to be Herman, you know, I'm supposed to be my brother, not me. And again, long story short, I ended up transferring from California to back to I had gotten caught up with the Black Panther Party in Oakland, California, where I'd gone to school, and things just got real gritty. And I decided I'm going home. So I went back to Philadelphia, and my brother and his friend enrolled me into Lincoln University in Oxford, PA, and got me off the street and got me into school. So later on in the years, and I was a good student. I had, by the time everything ended, I had a 3.4 average and a double major. And I met a friend, a very good friend. Her name was Beatrice Azuka. She was from Nigeria, and she was classmate, and we always talked and laughed and palled around. And one day she told me in a reading she did, and called me to her room to tell me, she said, George, if you do not become a priest,
You
you
mean
will.
like a spiritual reading? Is that
A
what you're talking?
spiritual reading. I had
Okay.
never had one before. And she called me to tell me what she had saw in the reading, and fed me some foods that were white foods. I know now it was for Obatala out of her culture. And told me that, George, if you don't leave and become a priest, you will never be anything in life. I tried to hold on as much as I could to the end of the semester. I just didn't want to just turn away from everything, but everything turned away from me. I ended up losing all of my financial aid, all of my housing, my campus job. Just everything just crumbled. I mean, literally crumbled, and I ended up having to leave to go back to Philadelphia, disappointed, and talking with my mom.
Let me ask you here real quick though. So, because you had said that you were a good student. So, and maybe I missed it what you were inferring to when you're saying this. You've now had basically a divine meeting, then you've had a pseudo divine meeting through a spiritual reading. So you're starting to get some pretty clear signals. But then why did that make school fall apart for you?
From the pseudo divine meeting with
Yeah.
Beatrice had came to me because she had obviously had received something through her own spiritual meetings or visitations, and it involved me. And she called to warn me, and she said, George, you won't even finish school. And it broke my heart. I'm like, are you kidding? Like, I'm doing great, and but the bursar actually wrote himself a check with everybody's financial aid and left to move to another country. So everything that I had, meaning my housing, uh, job, meals, uh, even classroom, I couldn't even buy books for the last semester, and ended up having to go home.
And she foresaw this well
And
before it happened.
she foresaw it, and I I'm talking about just done in. So the thing that happened from that was I ended up having to I sat down with my mother and asked her, would you mind if I said, if I have to be a minister, I want to know if you will mind if I try to see the possibilities of African religion, and she said, no. I mean, I saw the kind of disappointment on it first because she wanted me, we were Baptists, and she kind of looked at me and she said, well, you've been messing around down there with them African people since you were 14 years old. I won't get in your way. And so she gave me her blessings, which was a miracle in itself,
Mm.
if you know my mom. And and here's the bad part. I went to seek everybody I knew who wore dashikis and those hats and dreadlocks and shoe sticks and sandals and talked the talk, but none of them walked the walk.
Mm.
Not one. I'm talking about, I went around all of Philly, from everybody I knew, and you name a part of Philadelphia, I can name people that I knew who lived there that were perpetrating a fraud. They just did not know anything about African spirituality, nor could they. I mean, I was almost an embarrassment to them, because the more I talked to them, the more I exposed them, and the more embarrassing it became for them. And I was just like, God damn, shame on you. I'm thinking, I'm looking up to you, and I'm thinking you are supposed to be this person, and when it comes down to it, you are not.
So let me ask you, Papa Yatande, did you feel as though, as your recollection of these people, were they charlatans or were they just ignorant, trying to practice in a way that they believed was correct?
I don't think either one of those things. I think that
Okay.
they were not even charlatan because they weren't practicing to try and be priest. It was it was the end of the 70s, early 80s. So as you can imagine, the Black Power movement and everything that it was pointing everybody to understanding themselves as Africans. But we still had in our own minds a kind of kind of thing that held everybody kind of back. It was okay to say, well, yeah, we're African Americans, we're Black people, and to dress like Africans and wearing dashikis and things. But the one sting about it all was when other cultures made fun of Africans' uh, culture, dance, foods, all kinds of rituals and things that they saw that we didn't understand. We had no understanding of what we were looking at. And as a result of it, we were very much reluctant to kind of get involved because it was called devil worship. It was called evil. It was called just being bush people, something like that. And we had too much pride to find ourselves being labeled as that, especially living in the United States. So a lot of us, only and when I say only a handful of people in the United States who were from the 50s and 60s, like William Du Bois and others, and I can name pretty much all of them, went to Ghana, and which was the first place that they went into to begin understanding Akan religion and spirituality. And then coming back, like Arthur Hall, who I met, that's what my mother was talking about, hanging down there with them African people. And I began to hang with down there with Arthur Hall, who was a humanitarian center and taught African culture. And I began to not only learn about Ghana, but I also learned about Nigeria, and different other cultures. And in my own understanding and education with them, saw that this wasn't anything bad at all.
Now,
But
how old are you at this point?
I'm 18, yeah, about 18, 19 years old.
So you're right. You're still in your quote unquote formative years.
Yeah,
Um,
just a kid.
okay.
And I'm going on trying to find the truth because I believed what Beatrice saw and read was the truth. And it was, and I connected it with the apparition that I saw that evening all those years ago when I was only 16 years old. And so I went after it hard. You'll find something about me is, don't tell me, that you if you do this, this is gonna happen, because I'm going to believe you and I'm going to do this. And I went after it, and it exposed, like I said, so many people as charlatan, but it's not charlatan in the fact that they were actually trying to practice spirituality, but charlatan in the fact that they were perpetrating frauds
Well, yeah,
by trying to look at themselves as an African cultural people eating African foods. We start learning about African foods and African dancing and things like that. And you would see the brothers and sisters beating drums and dancing these dances, but none of them embraced spirituality because that was just too far. They're like, hey, let's hold up now. So when I finally started meeting people like elders, old folks who I had known and finally had come in contact with, that began to tell me about spirituality. One of the girls who was upset with me because I kind of exposed her, said, well, I challenge you to come to a bembe, and I'm like, a bembe, what is a bembe? She said, it's an African spiritual ceremony. I said, I'd love to go, because I wasn't upset with her or anything. You lied to me, and everything that you did and said and perpetrated who you were was a lie, is a lie. So she did take me to the place where I am right now, some 40 something years ago, it was 45 years ago, where I came to meet who would eventually become my wife. Guomambo Angela Novayana Daizo, who had just become a priestess in her own right. She had gotten initiated in the Akan religion down at Arthur Hall's, but Arthur told her that she couldn't, this wasn't her religion. She had to go on. So he told her, advised her, I suggest you go to Haiti. And she
The
eventually,
country.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
And she did. And she met eventually her and would be my godfather, Papa Hilaire Michel. And he initiated her to what they call a first level priest, a Petit Mambo. And that's when I first met her, when she was doing her first spiritual ceremony for Papa Ogun. Ogun is the force of fire and iron and the law of what they call truth. And so I came, I was excited. I thought it was, she had a lot of guests. I ended up playing drums for her because one of her drummers didn't arrive. And she asked me, do you know how to play drums? I was like, are you kidding? I'm from Ile Faye, I'm down without the hall. I can play drums. And ended up playing drums with her. And she invited me to her second ceremony. Long story short, she and I, she asked me to become a godchild, to be initiated. And I jumped at the opportunity. And she made me what is called a onsi, which is the first level of when you first get initiated, a godchild, what they call sequence. And she and I became so close that we actually looked at the basement of this house, and she plotted out how she wanted it to look, which we were trying to imitate. I didn't realize that's what she was trying to do, imitate the sanctuary in Haiti. And so we ended up taking the back wall in the basement where the garage was, knocking it down, extending and then putting where the garage door was, another wall with an exit door, a bathroom, where the hallway would have been to go out back, and start building. And here, I don't know anything about construction. And she's saying, well, you and I can do it. Come on. And like I told you, if you tell me that I can get water from a stone, I'm going to believe you. And I actually built all of the sanctuary houses for Papa Ogun, for Mayuiz, for Ishli Dantor, even some makeshift place for Baon. And she had some of the other places up in the front for Papa Dambala, and a little place where we built as we could.
And is this the beginnings of your Le
Very
Peristyle
beginning.
sanctuary?
Yes, this is the absolute beginning. And she and I did this. Eventually, I because I always thought she was a little strict. Well, I thought she was very strict, and I thought she was mean, because but she was just driven about it. She didn't want no nonsense from anybody or anything.
She had a mission.
She had a mission. And eventually, that's when I think I told you the story. She invited me to go to Haiti with her. And I'm standing in front of the drummers, and they looking at me. I'm looking at them. I'm drinking these drinks that Dominique is bringing me, and began to see my first actual real voodoo ceremony, because she was trying her best to teach us, the few of us. It was only about 8 of us. That grew to like 100 and something people over time. But this was something my mom, this what grew out of the vision that I had, something my mother's allowing me to pursue. Beatrice Azuka, who gave me the reading in college, and me just on my own going to find, just sniffing it out. And so after all of these years, this is what I've been doing. It's the only thing that I know. That's why I'm, and in the meantime, I wrote music, as you know. I've performed places where we did all kinds of things. I'm a painter. I paint. I do watercolors, and I do watercolors, acrylic, oil, pen and ink, things like that. And I have a nice collection of my own works. But I just needed to continue to branch out. I need to find somebody. I have a story. When I finished right, or maybe even alongside, and you can tell me if it's crazy. Alongside of the book that I'm writing about my own information, what I'm looking for is cut that off. What I'm looking for, Ross. I have a story about one of the most infamous Loa that everybody seems to know.
What's Loa?
Loa is the African or the spirit force. So you've heard of Baon, or may have. Baon is the one that every Hollywood picture, movie, cartoons and things, they imitate the one who wears all black, the top hat, the cigarette.
Mm.
He is the enforcer of death, and things like that. And I happen to know him very well, very, very well.
The spirit well.
Yes.
The spirit of death well.
Yes.
That would not be my first thought of the best friend that I'd want to be keeping around.
But you know what I learned about it, Ross, was while everybody was talking about, but believe me, I was very afraid and intimidated by this force. When it first came across us, and Mambo, or my wife kept telling me, he said, it's gonna visit us.
I want to be clear about this, Papa Yatande. We only have a couple of minutes left. Our time always goes by so quick. But when you say knowing this spirit, how not physical, but sort of how cohesive are these communications? Is it just a feeling? Do you ever hear direct messages? Is it just sort of coming to you in your dreams? So like, how does this relationship exist for you?
It first began with a spiritual possession on my wife, and he began to talk to me, and just me having to learn the language and have to learn his culture, because he's not like the other Loa. He's nothing like the other spirits. And he's a healer, actually. And he's one that then I began to see in my own dreams. Believe me, it was not an easy relationship. It was not easy for me to just get to know him and whatever. But I'm talking about a spirit who I consider to be one of my best friends. He saved my life maybe 2 or 3 times, because one of the theory is, as a controller in death, if it's not your time to die, and I had fallen into death, he takes and just kind of pushes you out of his territory, so to speak, and the other Loa would just take you and they'll bring you to health. When I fell from COVID, I actually died. They showed the records. He was the one who came and helped me along. I couldn't think. You know how what everything COVID does. And he was one of the Loa who visited and stayed with me the most to get me strong, and then back over to the other side. And I can go on talking about him, but maybe for the next time. And the reason why I introduce him is because I definitely want to tell a story that I think that a filmmaker or somebody like a writer would be like, my God.
So, Papa Yatande, yes, let's leave it there for today because we are almost out of time. But what has come up now in our conversation today are these spiritual communications and relationships on, for lack of a better term, on a much more terrestrial level. And it's very fascinating. And I think that does warrant its own show. Is that something that we could talk about in one of our upcoming shows?
I would love that.
Me too. I think everybody else would. And I'll say briefly that I do talk with other spiritual healers and people that do hypnotic therapy and things like that. And that moment between sleep and wake, dream and coming out of your dreams, is I hear this a lot, that is that brief moment and fragile moment where we can connect with the spiritual world. I'm not saying it's the only way it can be done, but certainly what you're talking about, I just want to say, is this is not even a second or third time that I've heard people talk about and declare what it is that you are hearing. So if you are listening to our show today, this may have sounded a little out there, but it is not. And Papa Yatande, George Turnage, I look forward to having you back on our next show, and we will continue this conversation. So thank you so much for being with us today.
You are welcome, and I plan to really blow your mind.
We all look forward to it. And thank you all for tuning in today. I am Ross Morasso. Until next time.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.